So we're going to talk about the front end of the car. We're going to talk about the right front is where we're going to start. And we're going to talk about the right front spindle, the right front hub, the right front kingpin, and the components that go with this. And I'm going to disassemble this so you can see how our standard car comes when you purchase one off the website or when you give us a phone call and order the car. So first we have the safety pin out here. This safety pin goes through the spindle. And when you remove that, you can then remove the spindle nut, okay? This spindle nut that we come standard on this car is a billet spindle nut. You can see it right there. When you put these spindle nuts onto the car, you don't want to crank it down because it has potential to bind the hub. And so you want to make sure that you just snug it down enough that it can hold the hub firmly on the wheel. But you also have to be able to get this safety pin into the spindle, technically the spindle axle itself. So it's going to be just a little bit loose right there. Okay, there still shouldn't be any play though on the hub. You don't want any play there. So once again, we're going to remove the safety pin. We're going to pull off the billet spindle nut, which then gives us access to the hub itself. I'm going to set these over here, set these aside. The standard setup on our car, on the Stealth or on the Wraith, is you're going to see some spindle spacers in here, some spindle axle spacers. These spindle axle spacers that are on the outside of this hub in particular are going to be 5/8 inch. So on the outside of the right front of our car, there's going to be one 5/8 inch by 1/4 inch spindle spacer and one 5/8 inch by 1/8 inch spindle spacer. You're going to have one of each on the outside of this. I'm going to set those two guys aside. Next, the entire hub will come off of this car. It'll easily slide off of this car. So I'm going to pull the hub off of this car. And I'm going to watch the backside so that I don't pull anything else off here. There's another spindle spacer we'll talk about in a second. Now that I have the hub off of the car, the right front of this car has a step hub on it. This is very common. You're going to see this in most any offset chassis cars is a right front step spindle. That step spindle is because the spindle is stepped here. That means that it goes from a 5/8 inch axle to a 3/4 inch axle. That requires that this hub have a 5/8 inch bearing on the outside and a 3/4 inch bearing on the inside. Now let's look at the hub itself. The hub, it's going to have 3 lugs, 3 studs, okay? The standard studs that come on our car have nipples on the end to make easy installation at the track of the lugs themselves. These lugs are not serrated. You'll notice that these lugs are smooth on the backside of these lugs. That is, if you have a serrated lug, they're going to bite into the wheel. And after a while, they're really going to wear into the wheel. And you really don't typically want that, and you typically don't need it. One of the things you want to watch is when you're putting these lugs onto the car, that you're torquing them down appropriately. You don't want to over torque them because what'll tend to happen is it will stretch this stud. And when it stretches it and you tighten it down, it weakens it and it'll tend to break. So you want to make sure that you're torquing these down appropriately. It doesn't take too much. You can do it with a ratchet. It's very easy to do. When a car is new, the other thing you want to watch is that you're not backing the studs out. Make sure that these studs are staying firmly in place. You can Loctite them. We often do on race cars is Loctite the studs into the hub itself. So next, what you'll see is when we take the hub apart, there's not a lot to it, really. We have a 5/8 inch bearing here on the outside, and we'll go over bearing maintenance in a later video. Inside, you're going to notice that there is a sleeve, okay? This is the bearing sleeve that goes in between the two bearings. So we have the bearing sleeve, the 5/8 inch bearing, and on the back end, we have the 3/4 inch bearing. That's all there really is to this hub. And you should typically, after a race night, you want to take this apart and you want to clean these bearings, which we'll go into later. So these should just drop in real easily. You don't want those to create any bind. So you notice how easily I was able to take these out and put these in. They sit in there really easy, just like that. There's nothing, you don't need a snap ring, anything to hold them in. We want these to be as free as possible. So I'm gonna set that hub aside. And now you'll notice we have the spindle axle, the spindle, and these are high impact spindles. Okay, these all come on our car as a standard feature. This is not an upgrade. This is the standard feature on our car. Another spindle spacer. On the back side of where the hub was located is a 3/4 inch spindle spacer, okay? This is another 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch diameter spindle spacer that goes on the back side, as I shown before, of the hub. That's the first thing you put on to the spindle will be this spacer. That's our standard setup. You're gonna notice that when you put the wheels on the car, the wheel will be very close to the spindle arm itself, the steering arm of the spindle. That's where we want it to be located. So we'll pull that guy off of there. Now you have the bare spindle. The spindle is now attached to this pivot point. The pivot point that we see right here is the kingpin. The kingpin is what the spindle rotates on. Kingpin inclination is very important. As you move the kingpin in towards the center of the car, this direction, or away from the car, you are creating what's called camber. As you move the kingpin or this heim that towards the inside of the car, you're going to create more negative right front camber. It's going to lift this spindle arm. As you push the heim out, and we'll go over that here in a second, and you push this spindle arm down, the spindle axle down, you're going to create positive camber. Another directional move that can be made here is by loosening these back two castle nuts, you can rotate this spindle and or this L block forward and backwards. That's going to create caster. And we'll talk about that here in a second as well. So I'm going to talk about the kingpin and the spindle arm just a little bit more. I'm going to take this apart so you can see how these components are put in here on the standard, the way that this car goes out the door. So one of the things you want to think about is if you have an older car or you have a car that it start to act different on the track, even though you haven't really made dramatic setup changes, one of the things you want to watch are spindle axles, this piece of steel right here, and kingpins. These are all things, just like the rear axle in the car, that can wear out. They won't last forever. They do absorb a lot of the shock on the car, especially the right front when it enters the corner. It has a lot of weight placed on it, which is the reason that we have a step hub here, is because it is taking so much weight upon entry of the corner that we have to have a larger bearing here to be able to take that weight and create less heat. Heat creates friction. We don't want friction. We want to remove as much friction as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this apart so you can see exactly how we standard assemble the kingpin into the spindle itself and into the L block. So what we first have is on top of the kingpin, we have another safety pin. It's the small safety pin. So I'm going to remove that. The next thing you're going to see on top is going to be the castle nut. We have a castle nut because there is a safety hole on top of the kingpin that allows that small safety pin to go through. You have to align the castle nut, the groove, so that that pin can actually go through there. So this should not be what we call farmer tight. You want to just snug this down so that you can get that safety pin in there. Obviously, you want to prevent any play, but you don't want to over tighten things. So let's take that. Can't turn it yet. Castle nut off of there. So pull off the castle nut, set it aside. Now, what's going to happen is this kingpin is going through the heim. It's going through spindle washers or kingpin washers, through the spindle, and then through more kingpin washers, and then through the bottom of this L block or L bracket, okay? And so if I tap on that, if I tap on this kingpin, you can see it's going to slide out the bottom of the L block here. Now, if I just pull that out, this whole thing is just going to fall apart, which it might just fall apart anyways. I guess we'll find out. But let's talk about the way that this comes standard. What we try to do is try to put this in the middle ground, okay? Is we have a variety of different washers, which I'll go through in a second. So let me just pull this out of here with hopefully not letting everything fall apart. We're going to see all the washers. Oh, there goes some washers. And pull this out of here like that. And this is one of those adjustments that you're going to make at the track quite often, is the adjustment of where the washers are located above or below the spindle. So when this kingpin is in here, see the kingpin goes through the bearings in the spindle. When it's in here, goes up through the heim, it can move up and down depending on what washers you have in or on the kingpin. So where this is located plays a large part in how much cross is in the car, okay? How much cross is in the car. If you want to add cross, you need to move washers from the bottom of the spindle to the top of the spindle and push the spindle arm down. If you want to remove cross from a car, you want to take washers from the top of the spindle and put them on the bottom of the spindle to move the spindle arm up. What this is doing is it's either lowering your front wheel and tire down towards the ground or raising it up away from the ground. Remember, down is going to add cross, up is going to remove cross from your car. That's one of the basics in this setup model. So as we learned, the washers determine where the spindle location is going to be. Our standard car is going to come with 2 1/4-inch, so they're 1/4-inch thick spindle washers. It's going to come with 1 thin 1/32 thick kingpin washer, and it's going to come with 4 1/16 thick kingpin washers. And then it's going to come with a castle nut, and it's going to come with the safety clip as well. And so our typical setup when these go out the door is we're going to put it about right in the middle so that you can determine what cross you want to run, or maybe you're just going to run what we send with the standard setup sheets. But either way, this is what you're typically going to get. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put these back on, and then we're going to talk through the caster and camber setup and take apart the L block, and I'll show you that. So the best way to go about doing this is, it often helps if you have someone that can help you, but you can do this on your own. So what we typically do is we will put 3 of these guys, 3 of the thick ones on the bottom of the 16ths thick, and then we'll put a thick washer, and you probably ought to do that after you start the kingpin in, or else you won't get them on. So we start the kingpin, drop these guys on here. This is the easiest part here. The top part is much harder. And then you slide that up through the spindle, so you can see those are down there. Nothing wrong with that. And then you'll notice that somehow I have to get washers in here, and then I have to push the kingpin through the washers and through that heim. And so this is often the trickiest part. So I'm going to free my hands up a little bit here to try to do this. So I have, now what I'm going to put on the top is I'm going to put a thick washer, I'm going to put a 16th washer and a 32nd washer. This should fill the gap sufficiently. And I usually put a little pressure on the kingpin as I'm doing this, and voila, up through it goes. And I'm going to grab my castle nut, tighten it down. And remember, like I said before, don't farmer tighten that thing down. You don't want to bind anything. And that's the thing with go-karting, is make sure that you're not binding anything. You can see that this swings freely. Everything's fine. I have the hole exposed in the castle nut so that I can put my small safety clip through, safety pin, snap pin through. and there it's reassembled. So what I'm going to do is when I'm setting this car up and I have it on the scales and I determine I need more cross, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this apart and I'm going to take and move some washers from here. Usually about one washer at a time is all it takes to move and change this cart significantly. This cart is very sensitive to changes, especially changes of the spindle location. So I'm going to take a washer from here. I'm going to move one to the top. It's going to push this down. It's going to add cross in my race car. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the caster and camber setup on this car. So the L-block setup on the Stealth and on the Wraith, our standard setup is a 15-degree L-block. That's paired with a 15-degree spindle. On the left side of the car, which we'll get to in a second, it has a 10-degree L-block. And the way that that works is it's the distance from the vertical of the L block out to the bearing that is in the L block itself that the kingpin actually goes through. You can see the difference in those two L blocks. The 15-degree one comes out much further. The 10-degree one is much shorter, and you can change these and try different ones. Our standard setup is, like I said, a 15-degree on the right side, a 10-degree on the left side. And you want to make sure that your spindle degree matches your L block degree. And so in this case, on this side, like I said, 15 degrees with a 15-degree spindle as well. And that spindle has the degree written on it too. You'll notice on the top, the left and the rights are different, but you'll notice that it has the numbers so that you can set caster, which we'll go to right now. We'll start talking about that. So the L block itself is attached to the cart at the caster block. This caster block is welded to the front hoop of the car on both the left and the right hand sides. This caster block, if you look at the top of it, it has two marks. The forward mark relates to the forward holes, which I'll show you in a second in the caster block. The back mark relates to the back holes. Our cart, upon standard setup, we always use the back holes and we always use the rear marks on this to line up the caster for this car. Now, just a little tip. If you have an older car or a car that you're not really confident in the numbers that have been etched, whether it's our car or somebody else's car, whatever, something that you can do is you can actually check whether or not they're accurate or set them up manually. And the way that I like to do that is I like to use a digital level, and I will use typically the frame rail of the car back here by the cassette. I will get 0. I will set my digital level to 0. I will then place that on the side of the L block to determine whether or not my numbers are actually accurate on an older car. Now, if you're lucky enough to have one of these guys, this is a pretty cool little tool. This Jones caster tool slides right over the caster block, and it's even made to hold one of these digital levels like that. So once you get the car level, if you're on scales, that works too, or you can set 0 back there on the frame rail. You can actually really accurately check the caster of the car with a tool like this. So that's a neat little tip, especially if you don't trust the numbers on maybe an older go-kart, that you can do to make sure that you're really being precise about that. But back to this car, I'm going to go ahead and take this apart right here so that we can see how the caster is set and really how camber works as well. So one of the things I want to show you is that I'm going to loosen the nut on the outside here of the L block. I'm going to remove, there's 2 snap pins or safety pins on this car that are on the back side here. There's one right here. This one can kind of be a little bit of a booger. Get him off of there. That comes off. And then underneath the car, down here, is another one of these safety pins, snap pins, that you have to remove as well. And once those are off, you can kind of just push them out of the way, let them hang down here. And you can see that there's a bolt here into the caster block that goes into the L block. And then we have the Heim that goes through the L caster block into the caster block as well. When we loosen these, it allows us to do a couple things. One, it allows us to rotate the L block, as I'll show you for caster. This on top will actually allow us to adjust camber. And so I'm going to show you that right now, how to make a camber adjustment. What you want to do is you're going to loosen this nut right here. You're then going to make sure that the rear castle nut is loose. This now allows you to make an adjustment on camber going forward, going this direction. So remember, as we talked previously, if you move the Heim in towards the L block, which right now it's pretty much buried, we're going to be adding camber or negative camber to this car. If we were to adjust the Heim this direction, and if as I turn this castle nut, you can see it moving towards me. See that subtle movement? As that moves towards me, it's pushing the spindle axle down and giving me positive camber. On the right side of the car, you typically don't ever want positive camber. Now, if I rotate, and I'm doing this as an exaggeration, if I rotate the castle nut and I keep turning it, you see how it's sucking the Heim back in towards the center of the car? Remember, that's raising the spindle axle. It's raising it up and giving me negative camber on the right side of this car. So what's also nice about the L blocks that you see here is these L blocks actually have a recess in them for the washer, and this is only on the right side. That allows you to put more camber. It gives you a little more room to put a little bit more camber in this car if you feel that that's necessary for what you have going on with your setup. So once you have the camber set, all you really have to do then is tighten down both this inside nut and the nut out here over here on the inside of the car, the castle nut. Tighten those down. And then you have your camber set where you want it, depending on what your camber angle finder is showing you and what you're looking for at the time. We'll go over complete setup in another video. So then what we want to talk about is the caster car. So now the caster on the car, what you need for that is we use 3/4 inch wrench or 2 3/4 inch wrenches for the top two Heim bolts right there. To be able to change caster, you have to loosen the bolt that goes through the caster block and goes into the L block, and you're going to need a 9/16 for that. So we just want to loosen that just a little bit. We don't have to take it out by any means. We want to make sure we get it loose enough that we can turn this. Now, the top two nuts on the Heim are also going to have to be loose for this setting. So we want to make sure that we have these guys just a little bit loose as well. Now that I have both loose, you can see that I can turn the L block in there to set caster. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to completely remove this so that you can actually see what I was talking about with the holes in the caster block, and you can actually see what it looks like when it's completely disassembled. So when I pull this castle nut off of here, you're going to find that there's a washer behind that castle nut. There should be a thick washer behind that castle nut. That's a 16th inch washer. There's also one on this side behind that nut as well. Now I'm going to pull out the bottom bolt that holds the L block into the caster block too. Get this guy out of here. So now we've disassembled the L block, from the caster block. And you can see that this caster block itself has slots on the top and the bottom. Those slots are what allow you to rotate the L block, well, wrong one. the right side, 15-degree L block. This L block can rotate in there. And the little nub on the back of the L block is what is very important that you have it in the correct hole. It's because this is going to lengthen or shorten the car, which will change all kinds of things within the setup. We always on standard run in the back holes on the left and the right of both the Wraith and the Stealth. And so all you have to do is with this L block is put it in the rear hole like that. And now you can see you can rotate caster that way really easily. So not a big deal. Just want to make sure you're not putting it in the front holes. Remember, the rear hole allows you to line the numbers on the top up with the rear slot, the rear mark on the caster block. Makes it really easy to line that up. You don't ever want to put it in the back hole and then try to line it up with the front mark. That'll really screw things up and your caster will be all kinds out of whack. So what we're going to do is we'll go back and show you how to set the caster here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm in the back hole. Yep. And then all I have to do is reassemble. So I'm going to put the washer onto the Heim, put the castle nut on. I get it started and snug down on there. That'll hold it in place pretty decently. Now this bolt that goes through the caster block, this caster block bolt that goes into the L block, it obviously has a hole in it for that safety pin we removed, has a very thick washer because we don't want this to pull out of that L block. And it's going to go in the back slot into the L block. We're going to tighten it down. Just get it in there far enough that we can still make our adjustments. Now, on the Stealth and the Wraith, our standard setup, something you always want to check with your car, especially if you get into one of the discs or something like that, is you always want to check your caster, make sure it hasn't got knocked out of whack. Our standard setup that you're typically going to see out of the gate is going to be 11 and 7. So we're going to have an 11-degree right front caster, and we're going to have a 7-degree left front caster. And so if you look at the top of this, you'll notice the marks. Well, guess what? It doesn't have every number on it. It has a 14, a 12, a 10, an 8, a 6, a 4. So what we have to do to get 11 is we have to go between the 10 and the 12. So I want the back mark, because I'm in the back holes, to line up right between the 10 and the 12. So once I have that set, I'm going to grab my 9/16 inch wrench, and I'm going to tighten down the bottom bolt that's under the caster block on the bottom. And I'm going to watch that and make sure that it doesn't move. So I got it nice and snug. I can tighten this down. I can farmer tighten that, as we say, if I want to. Don't over tighten it, but it can be very tight to make sure that it can't move on the caster. And then I'm going to go ahead and snug down both of the castle nut and the nut that's right here on the Heim, assuming that I have my camber set appropriately. I'm going to go ahead, get a wrench on both of those. Snug those up. Everything moves freely. Looks good. It can't move. Caster and the camber are both set. I'm still at 11 degrees over here, which is where I want to be. Everything looks good. Now I can go ahead and finalize putting this back together because I've made the appropriate settings. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my safety pins here, get them where I want them. Usually run the little one on top and the big one on the bottom just to make it easier to assemble and take apart because these little pins can kind of be a pain in the butt. Get both of these started here. Lock that one in. Lock the top one in. Like that. Now it's back to being reassembled the way that we want it to be. Then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put my hub back on while I'm here. So I'm going to once again take my 3/4 inch by 1/4 inch spindle spacer, put it on. Make sure that I have my sleeve in my hub and my two bearings. Everything's free. I'm going to slide that on. Remember, we have a step hub and a step spindle. Going to then grab my other spacers once again, which was both 5/8 inch diameter. One's a 1/4 inch, one's an 1/8 inch. It's a standard setup. This is what you want to have on your car. Then I'm going to put the spindle, the billet spindle nut on here. Remember, we're not over tightening that. And then I'm going to, well, I got to find there it is. I have to line up the hole so that I can actually put the pin through here. So I found the hole in the spindle, lined it up. Now remember, I don't want to over tighten this. I can't see the hole here. I would rather back it off and put it in than I would over tightening to get to the hole. I want to keep everything free. And then the pin goes in. I don't have any play here. I don't have any play here. Everything is snug. Everything moves freely. Looks good. So if you've watched the right side of the car, the right side spindle, hub, caster camber assembly, you have a pretty good idea of how things work. However, I do want to go over a few things that are different from the right side of the car to the left side. So on the left side of the car, the assembly is pretty much exactly the same. You're going to adjust caster by loosening the bottom bolt on the caster block, by loosening the castle nut and the regular nut, and you're going to adjust your caster. As I said before, we set our cars up at 11 and 7 to go out the gate. The right side's 11 and this side is set at 7 right now. It's on the back notch. The L block is in the back holes on the caster block itself. The L block's in the back holes on the caster block, and you can see the gap that's up here that sort of signals that. And so we're going to line up with the back notch on the top with the numbers. So I'm not going to go over how to adjust the caster and camber again on this side, but I am going to talk about the hub briefly. This hub is different than the right side hub. And we talked about the right side hub being a step hub. This one is not a step hub. This does not have quite as much pressure or produce quite as much heat as the right side, and so we don't have to worry about friction quite as much. So what I'm going to do is disassemble this one real quick to show you how the spacers are done over here as well. So this is a billet castle nut that goes on the spindle, just like the other side. On this side, we have a 5/8 inch and another 5/8 inch spindle spacer, okay? These are both 1/4 inch spindle spacers, okay? 1/4 inch by 5/8 inch around. So on the outside of this spindle, we're always gonna have two of these guys. It's always going to be two of them. Next, we're gonna have the hub itself. Not dissimilar from the other hub, other than the fact that this hub, and if we look at right here, see if I can pull it off without, we'll notice that the spindle axle on the left side is one size. The right side, step hub. This is not a step hub. This shaft, the spindle axle itself, is 5/8 of an inch all the way across. That means that this hub has a 5/8 inch bearing here and a 5/8 inch bearing on the back side as well. Now you'll notice right here, we have another 1/8 inch spacer, spindle hub spacer right here. So the way that this one is assembled is it gets one spacer there. The hub, which once again has the sleeve inside between the two bearings, has a different sleeve than the right side, just sits in there, has a 5/8 inch bearing on both sides, and they should slide in just this easy. See how easy that is? They should not bind. You should not have to force them in. If there is a problem. Same with this side, super easy. They'll just fall out of there. So we have our spacer. We're going to slide our hub on. If we can. Nice and easy. Wiggle it. Has to get through that sleeve in the center. Goes on. Spins free. We're going to take our two spacers that go on the outside. This is one of the most important things that I see messed up a lot, is that people don't know what spacers go where. So make sure that you watch this video and you pay attention to see the small spacer here, and then you see the two larger spacers here, okay? Next, once again, we put on the billet castle nut. We don't want to over tighten it. We want to make sure that if we can't see the hole, we back it off till we can see the hole in the spindle axle. And we put our safety snap pin through, and it's reassembled. There's no play here. There's still no play. And so that's fine. Now, also remember on the left side, you're going to have a different spindle. You're going to have a different L block. This is going to be a match set, a 10-degree L block and a 10-degree spindle. The right side was 15-degree L block and 15-degree spindle. This side is 10-degree on both sides. It's going to function the same way over here with the kingpin washers. The kingpin washers can be moved top to bottom, bottom to top. This side is going to be exactly the opposite as the right side. If I am going to move the spindle on this side down, I am going to decrease cross. If I'm going to move this spindle up, I'm going to increase cross. We often don't mess with cross on this side of the car. We often have it placed where we have it now, which is approximately the center. And we do most of our cross adjustments on the right front of this car. So you can see it has the same types of washers. It has the thicks, has the thin, has the 1/32 washer as well. Has the exact same assembly method as the right side, and you would move them in that same method here as well.